Hollywood didn't just almost cancel Tombstone, it nearly erased it completely. Before it became one of the most quoted westerns of all time, before audiences fell in love with its characters and unforgettable lines, the film was hanging by a thread, buried under chaos, clashing visions, and decisions that could have ended it forever. For decades, the real story stayed hidden, tucked quietly behind credits and whispered among those who were there. But when the truth finally surfaced, it revealed something far more unsettling than anyone expected. Because Tombstone wasn't saved the way most films are. It survived because of risks, secrets, and choices that were never supposed to come to light. At the center of it all was a man with a vision so ambitious it almost destroyed everything. Kevin Jarre didn't want to make just another Western. He wanted to recreate history. To him, the story of Wyatt Earp and the events in Tombstone weren't just entertainment. They were something to be preserved with absolute authenticity. He spent years studying the Old West, digging into real accounts, understanding how people spoke, dressed, and lived. When he finally brought his vision to life, it wasn't polished or simplified. It was raw, detailed, and deeply immersive. Every costume, every line of dialogue, every small background moment was meant to feel like it had been pulled straight out of 1881. That level of passion drew serious talent. Actors like Kurt Russell and Sam Elliott didn't just join for the roles. They joined because they believed in what Jarre was trying to build. In the early days, there was a genuine sense that something special was taking shape. The cast could see the world coming together, piece by piece, exactly as Jarre imagined it. But that same obsession with perfection quickly became the film's biggest problem. The script alone was a warning sign. While most movies run about 110 pages, Jarre's version stretched beyond 200. It wasn't just long, it was dense. Even minor characters had full backstories. Entire sequences were layered with historical detail that, while impressive, made filming incredibly difficult. What should have been a focused production turned into something unmanageable. The crew wasn't just shooting a film anymore, they were trying to capture what felt like an entire era in one go. And then there was the desert. Filming in Arizona wasn't just uncomfortable, it was punishing. Long hours in extreme heat, heavy costumes, endless dust. Days dragged on with little progress, and frustrations began to build. Jarre, still new to directing on this scale, struggled to keep things moving. He would spend hours adjusting small details while the rest of the cast and crew waited under the sun. What he saw as dedication, others began to see as delay. Behind the scenes, the tension was growing fast. Studios don't run on passion, they run on schedules and budgets. And Tombstone was slipping on both. Costs were rising, footage was limited, and confidence in the project was beginning to fade. The gap between Jarre's vision and what the studio expected became impossible to ignore. To him, it was careful storytelling. To them, it looked like a production spiraling out of control. Then the atmosphere on set started to change. What began as excitement slowly turned into exhaustion. Crew members were working long hours with little to show for it. Morale dropped. Frustration boiled over in strange ways. Stories later emerged of crew members crashing golf carts into each other just to release tension. It sounded absurd, but it reflected a deeper truth. The production had lost its sense of direction. Eventually, the studio made a decision that shocked everyone. Kevin Jarre was fired. Without warning, without a gradual transition, the man who created the entire vision was suddenly gone. He wasn't just removed from directing, he was banned from the set entirely. For the cast, it felt like the heart of the film had been ripped out. They had signed on because of Jarre's passion, his commitment to authenticity. Now, they were standing in the middle of the desert with a half-finished movie and no clear path forward. At that moment, it looked like Tombstone was over. But that's when something unexpected happened. The studio brought in George Cosmatos, a seasoned director known for handling large productions. On the surface, it seemed like the solution. Cosmatos had experience, discipline, and the ability to take control of chaotic situations. When he arrived, there was a sense that stability had returned. The cast and crew finally believed the film might still have a chance. But what no one outside that set realized was this. Cosmatos wasn't the one truly in charge. The real decisions, the ones shaping the film, were coming from somewhere else entirely. Kurt Russell. Already carrying the weight of playing Wyatt Earp, Russell stepped into a role no one expected. He didn't announce it. He didn't take credit. He simply took control when it mattered most. During the day, he acted, under the scorching sun, in heavy costumes, delivering one of the most iconic performances of his career. But when filming stopped, his work was far from over. While others rested, Russell stayed up late into the night, going through the script line by line. He cut scenes, refined dialogue, mapped out shots. He transformed that massive, unwieldy script into something that could actually work on screen. By morning, those plans would quietly make their way onto set, delivered by Cosmatos, who presented them as his own. It was a silent partnership. Russell became the film's ghost director, guiding everything from behind the scenes while Cosmatos remained the public face. And it had to stay that way. Hollywood rules were strict. If it became known that an actor was secretly directing a major production, it could have triggered serious consequences, possibly shutting the film down entirely. So the secret was kept, and slowly things began to change. The chaos that once defined the production started to settle. Scenes came together more smoothly. The cast regained confidence. There was a new sense of direction, even if most people never fully understood where it was coming from. Russell wasn't doing it for recognition. He didn't push for credit or control. He did it because he believed the film deserved to be finished. But even as the production found its footing, a new challenge was quietly taking shape, one that would test the film in a completely different way. When the footage started coming together, attention shifted to the performances, and one character, in particular, stood out. Doc Holliday. Played by Val Kilmer, the character was unlike anything the studio expected. Instead of a traditional Western gunslinger, Kilmer created someone far more complex. Doc wasn't just dangerous, he was fragile, unpredictable, almost ghost-like. His presence carried both charm and menace, often shifting between the two in a single moment. To Kilmer, this wasn't just a role. It was a transformation. He pushed himself physically and mentally to embody the character. To capture the effects of tuberculosis, he reportedly put his body through extreme conditions, even lying on cold surfaces between takes to create a natural shiver. His movements, his voice, his expressions, everything was carefully crafted to reflect a man slowly fading, yet still capable of sudden intensity. But when the studio saw early footage, they didn't see brilliance. They saw risk. Doc Holliday felt too different, too intense, too unpredictable. They worried audiences wouldn't understand him, wouldn't connect with him. There were serious discussions about reducing his role, even cutting significant portions of his scenes. It was a turning point, because removing or changing Doc Holliday wouldn't just affect one character, it would reshape the entire film. Kurt Russell saw what others didn't. He understood that Doc's unpredictability was exactly what the story needed. Where Wyatt Earp was controlled and steady, Doc brought tension, chaos, and depth. Their dynamic gave the film emotional weight. Without it, something essential would be lost. So he stood firm. Despite pressure from the studio, the performance remained untouched. No major cuts, no softened edges. The character stayed exactly as Kilmer intended. And when the film was finally released, everything changed. Audiences didn't reject Doc Holliday, they embraced him. His lines became the most quoted. His presence became the most memorable. What the studio once feared became one of the film's greatest strengths. But just as things seemed to be falling into place, another obstacle emerged, this time from outside the production. At the same time Tombstone was struggling to survive, another film was being developed. A competing version of the Wyatt Earp story, backed by a major star and a much larger budget. Compared to that project, Tombstone looked like the underdog. Smaller, less stable, and far more uncertain. And the competition wasn't passive. As production continued, the Tombstone team began encountering strange problems. Essential resources, costumes, props, even horses suddenly became difficult to secure. Suppliers that would normally provide these materials were no longer available. At first, it seemed like coincidence, but over time, it became clear something else was happening. Access was being limited. Faced with these challenges, the team had to adapt quickly. Instead of relying on local sources, they expanded their search internationally. It was a risky move, more expensive, more complicated, but it paid off in an unexpected way. The materials they found were not only usable, they were better. More detailed, more authentic, more aligned with the original vision. What started as a setback became an advantage. Still, the pressure never fully disappeared. The cast and crew knew they were working on a film many expected to fail. But instead of breaking them, that pressure brought them together. There were no grand speeches, no dramatic turning points, just a shared determination to finish what they had started. By the time filming wrapped, Tombstone had survived more than most productions ever face. But survival came at a cost. When the final version was assembled, it was clear that something had been lost along the way. The original vision, the deeper, more detailed story Kevin Jarre had created, had been trimmed down. Entire subplots were gone. Characters were simplified. Moments that once added emotional weight had disappeared in the process of making the film work. What remained was powerful, but incomplete. Those who were there understood it. They could see both versions, the one that made it to the screen and the one that existed only in memory. The relationships that were never fully explored. The scenes that were filmed but never shown. The complexity that had to be sacrificed for the sake of time and structure. And yet, despite everything that was lost, something else endured. The heart of the film. It lived in the performances, in the dialogue, in the moments that managed to survive the chaos. It lived in the quiet decisions made behind the scenes, the risks, the sacrifices, the determination to keep going even when everything seemed to be falling apart. That's what makes Tombstone different. Not just the story it tells on screen, but the story behind it. A film shaped by conflict, rescued by unexpected hands, and defined as much by what was lost as by what remained. And maybe that's the real question that lingers. If everything had gone smoothly, if the budget had been bigger, the schedule tighter, the vision untouched, would the film still feel the same today? Would it still carry that edge, that sense of something hard-earned? Or is it the struggle itself, the imperfections, the unseen battles, that gave Tombstone its lasting impact? Because sometimes the stories that survive the hardest fights are the ones we remember the longest.